Alright, this is Marvel Comics Presents 34, and I have almost nothing positive to say about Marvel Comics Presents as a series. Great idea in concept, executed half-arsed and half-hearted, and it just became a dumping ground to print try-out stories that Marvel got done cheap. Marvel Comics Presents is an anthology book, and it has 4 stories in it, and you see the cover here and you think, oh, they are doing a solo story with Morgan from Excalibur. That makes sense. But what it actually is an 8-part Excalibur story that they threw in here, written by a terrible editor who makes an even worse writer. Excalibur had their own title at this point. Excalibur had loads of specials and one-shots, which were usually just stuff that was meant to go in Marvel Comics Presents in the first place. But my point is, this is not the right thing to put in Marvel Comics Presents. Excalibur have their own series. Marvel Comics Presents is an anthology book. It should be used for stories starring characters who maybe cannot have their own title, but are definitely due the spotlight. Morgan, as a solo character, would be a good example, but this is just a sloppy Excalibur story, clunkily broken up into 8 separate parts. This is Brie Larson's granddad doing the art. Marvel Comics Presents was a tryout for writers and artists. Scott Loball, Fabio Nicieza, their earliest works are in this series. When the book began, it had credible creative teams or characters, but by about issue 20, all of them had moved on, and the book morphed into an insult to customers. With this, you were basically paying for stories that didn't matter, that Marvel are only printing because these stories were cheaper to get done due to the new talent involved. The other thing which becomes even more evident with this next story, this is a spectacularly bad way to tell stories. They are all 8 pages long, and rather than write an 8-page long story, or a story that works out broken up into 8-page parts, they write a story and then they break it up and insert false momentum and cliffhanger stakes every 8 pages. That is another problem. Very few of the stories in Marvel Comics Presents are standalone. This Excalibur one, this is part 4 of 8. And then we have a Black Panther one. And Black Panther, he is a solid choice for a character to feature in this series. This is part 22 of 25. Fucking ridiculous. If you picked up this book, you have 3 stories that are all over halfway done, and none of them are written from the perspective that each part might be someone's first part. I didn't bother reading this Black Panther one. What's the point of reading part 22 and part 22 alone? This inaccessibility is a fundamental failing for an anthology book. I do think this is the longest serial they ever did in Marvel Comics Presents, but the arrogance to think that anyone is sticking with this very poor quality book for 25 consecutive issues because there is maybe 8 good pages of a never-ending Black Panther story in there. Black Panther, he is a great character to spotlight in Marvel Comics Presents, but the wrong way to spotlight him in an anthology book is 25 8-page parts of a story. If you've got a long Black Panther story to tell, just do a mini-series. Or even just drop some of the other stories in this issue to extend the page length of it. Then after Black Panther, we have part 9 of a story starring a new character. That is all well and good, but the character doesn't have any real major appearances after this 10-part story. And almost 90% of everything ever done in Marvel Comics Presents is never referred to again. This was a book that never mattered. Maybe this character who is called Cold Art or Cold Blood or something like that. Maybe he is actually a great character, but nobody will ever know because only masochists have sat down and read every single Marvel Comics Presents story, because the overwhelming majority of them are terrible filler stories by nobodies. Our very last story it's the only one in here that is a standalone, and even though it is announced as a Captain America story, which again is pointless since Captain America has his own series, he's not got a shortage of representation in the Marvel line. Why is Captain America being spotlighted in an anthology book? Despite it having Captain America as the title character, this falls more into being a spotlight on an odd Golden Age character called Plastic Man, and Captain America is just along for the ride. We would often have one story every few issues where it would be a character like this, and the story would be inconsequential. This one is different, as it ends up being referred to again and used heavily as the basis for Plastic Man's character arc in the 2004 Invader-As series. Plastic Man, he has tracked down an odd Nazi enemy who is responsible for wiping out a hidden society of Magic Mountain people that had become Plastic Man's adopted race. Plastic Man, he wants revenge, he wants to kill him, but then we find out that this guy is illegally, he has been pardoned for his crimes. He is part of, or he was part of Operation Paperclip. He is one of the Nazis who were brought over to the United States after the war ended to work for American intelligence agencies. And Plastic Man, he just wants to kill him. But Captain America is obviously, you cannot do that. And so the two of them end up having a fight and a serious debate as Captain America is trying to stop Plastic Man. But in the end, Plastic Man kills the Nazi, and Captain America is disgusted by his one-time ally in the Invader As. After this, Plastic Man, he ends up having a massive hate-on for Captain America, and that is very important to his character after this. The story itself is below average. It is really only held up by it actually proven to have some merit. Not just because it was brought back and made a big part of Plastic Man's canon, but I like the idea of showcasing a forgotten about character like Plastic Man. And I think on paper, this isn't the worst story ever, but it's just by a creative team that submitted this as a tryout for Marvel work, and Marvel are being super cheap and publishing it because they didn't have to commission it. Marvel Comics Presents really is one of the worst comic book things out there. It is a completely pointless and hopeless series that ran for 175 issues. And it wasn't alone. Marvel had several other books like this. There was Marvel Funfair, which they published at the same time, where they just shoved in inventory stories or unprinted stories that they had sitting in a drawer somewhere. I think Marvel Comics Presents, it could be a great book, but it never was. There was potential in the idea, but it was never met. There was occasionally a story or a character that worked, but there was just too much throughout its run that was utterly terrible and ineffective. I really cannot recommend even a single serial from the whole series, because there are always 3 other ones attached to it, and they are probably all crap. Let me present this comic with 7 thumbs up.